Well, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. This is a monster sports weekend. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. Now, if the Bengals were a little bit better, yeah, it would be better. I have to confess. But man, if you're into sports and you're into football, this is your weekend. Even starting tonight in the NFL, which we'll get to in a minute. I'm Tom Brenneman. We welcome you to Dialed In, presented by UDF and Encore Technologies, joined by Luke Brenneman, who is back from Bloomington, Indiana, although you're jumping back in the car tomorrow and headed to South Bend, Indiana for the big showdown tomorrow night.
Yes, sir. The state championship game kicking off the entire expanded 12-team college football playoff. I don't know. I would make the argument, guys, outside of the Ohio State SEC Big Ten, matchup. This is the game. This is the one that everyone's looking forward to watching. That's why they put it on Friday night in that solo 8 p.m. ESPN slot. They want no competition for this game. Ratings are going to crush it through the roof. The Indiana-Ohio State game was one of the most watched college football games inside the top 3 of the entire season, and I think that everybody is going to have their eyes to see if Indiana can really play with the big boys, and then for Notre Dame, a little bit of the same. I mean, outside of a road win in the inaugural week of the season, they really don't have that good of a win since. So it's a really good matchup with two teams that are actually freakishly similar in the way they play. We'll get into more of that later into the show.
Yeah, we'll get into all of that in a little bit. And then our producer, contributor extraordinaire, as always, one Casey McAllister. Casey, how are you doing? Are you ready for a big sports weekend? Is that a Bengals shirt you have on? What is that you have on there? That's an FC. Forget.
Their schedule gets released soon, so I thought I'd wear some FC gear.
Oh my God!
The big headliner for Cincinnati sports.
Well, you know what? You may not be far off from the truth there, although the basketball team here at UC is pretty doggone good. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on tonight because, like I was saying, this is a really big sports weekend. And, I mean, you don't have to just love football, even though we start with the NFL tonight. We'll get to that in a second. And we have basketball over the weekend as now conference play is kicking into gear. So this is good stuff. We come your way twice a week, as you know, on Dialed In. Mondays at 9 o'clock, Chatterbox Sports. Please join us. Then later that day, we post on the Believe Network. And then Thursdays here at noon. You can find us anywhere, anytime. YouTube, Chatterbox Sports page, and download us anywhere, anytime. Just search Off the Bench or search Dialed In with Tom Brenneman, and you're dialed in. We just finished Off the Bench. Guys were on their game today. All right, Bengals and Brownies get together Sunday at Paycor. Second time they've met this year. First game was ugly. No other way to describe it. The Bengals were 3 of 12 on third down attempts. They only had a total of 223 yards of offense, but still won the game by 7, 21-14. The teams are an even 3-3 here in Cincinnati over the last 6 years. Up until this year, Cleveland had dominated this series up by the lake. I'm surprised, quite frankly, the Bengals are 7+ point favorites. And who knows? Maybe they win the game by 30. Still Jameis, the quarterback, no Deshaun Watson. Browns again without injured star running back Nick Chubb. But they do play good defense. We know that. Kickoff on CBS is set for 1 o'clock. Are you a Jim Harbaugh fan? No? Well, you might want to be one starting tonight for sure. Or at least root for his Chargers against the Broncos. Basically, the Bengals extremely slim playoff chances. And we're right on the border of slim and none, and Slim rode out of town yesterday. The very slim playoff hopes rest on winning out, of course, for the Bengals and praying the Broncos lose their last 3. And look, it's not beyond inconceivable the Broncos could lose their last 3. They got the Chargers tonight. They play the Bengals, and then they play Kansas City. We'll get into that later. But college football is the talk of the country. And as Luke mentioned, it starts tomorrow night. Indiana v. Notre Dame. Then a triple header on Saturday. It starts with SMU at Penn State, followed by Clemson at Texas. And the nightcap up the road in Columbus to Ohio State will host Tennessee. We'll talk about each of these games, and we'll pick your winners for you. That's coming up later. And then lastly, in college basketball, hey, look, give it up to Xavier. I mean, X laid it all on the line last night at UConn. Eventually lost in overtime, 94-89. X shot a whopping 54% from three. They're without Zach Freemantle for a while. You hope it's not for the year. And without him, they were dominated. 50-28 points in the paint. And next up, Marquette, who's ranked 9th in the country at home at Centos Center. That's Saturday at noon. And then the big one tomorrow night. Downtown Cincinnati is going to be rocking tomorrow night. 19th ranked UC hosts number 22 Dayton. I mentioned UConn and Marquette. Dayton has already beaten both of those teams this year already. Tip-off is set for 8:30 tomorrow night at Heritage Bank Arena, and that will be a sellout. Because as old as that arena is, it was built for basketball, and they used to have, the regional semis and the regional finals. It was one of the great venues in the country for years and years. It is still a great place to watch a basketball game once you get in your seat. That place will be packed. Dayton has great fans, UC great fans, and looking forward to that tomorrow night. All right, fellas, let's get to it. We begin with, of course, the Bengals. Look, I got to tell you guys, I think there's a lot going on with this Bengals team right now. Zach Taylor keeps getting peppered with questions, as does Joe Burrow in his press conference yesterday about the whole mindset and what's going on there. I love Burrow's responses. I mean, I wish every player was as upfront and honest as he was. He said, look, I've done some bad things. I turned the ball over 3 times in the game last week. I don't like how we look. I'm embarrassed how we look. We have a standard. He's holding himself accountable. He's holding his coach accountable. He's holding his organization accountable. And he's holding his teammates accountable. By the way, he came out and said, we're going to find out who shows up these last 3 weeks. Luke, I don't know about you. I love it. I wish every player was like that.
I think Joe Burrow is really coming into his own right now. You can make the argument when he was an MVP candidate and took us to the Super Bowl a couple of years back that he had already come into his own. But as a leadership perspective, he is progressing week by week. And, some people don't love him kind of yelling at his head coach on the sideline. But if you really dive down into it and you look at some of maybe even like the John Boy lip reading breakdowns, you kind of get a feel of what he's saying, where it's almost that like Zach Taylor, like, hey, Joe, let me pat you on the back. We got the win. We're 6-8. And Joe is just sitting there just letting this bubble just almost burst in his head where he's like, I don't care if we're beating the Titans. We had north of 100 yards in penalties. We get backed up twice on the 1-yard line on 1st and goal. Let's execute. Let's play like the team that coming into this season, people not just on Cincinnati sports talk shows, but nationally were saying the Cincinnati Bengals are a Super Bowl candidate. Look at the roster. Look at the offense. That's what we thought they were. They're not right now, but there's no reason to give up and quit. Now, I'm going to make the argument here. The Chargers, they lose tonight. The Broncos win.
Oh, my God. Please stop it.
How much does your draft stock really matter? How much do the Bengals want to put in to their draft stock and draft capital and tanking at this point? Because they totally still have a chance. I mean, if the Chargers win on Thursday Night Football, the Bengals are 8-point favorites against a Browns team that is god-awful. And you kind of start playing that survive and advance game. Because you make it to next week, you control your own destiny for another week. Because the Broncos have to lose, the Bengals have to win, and it turns out that the Bengals play the Broncos. So you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And if you make it to week 18, we all know anything can happen in 1 week of football. I know there's still some other circumstances with, Miami and Indy still losing a game. But, I mean, it's not over till it's over. If the Chargers win tonight, it is completely over. Phone it in, ladies and gentlemen.
Casey, please tell me, and this is probably a stupid question knowing you and the way you wear your orange and black glasses. Please don't tell me that you're thinking the Bengals have a fighting chance for the playoff. Please don't tell me.
Oh, yeah.
Please
of course,
don't tell me.
Tom, of course, I think they have a fighting chance. Especially, this is the biggest game in deciding those final few weeks, right? If the Chargers win, I think the Bengals have a really good shot because, one, I think the Colts are kind of showing their true colors. They're fumbling in the most big moments. There's really big-time moments for them. I think there's a chance that they can lose a game, especially with a team like the Titans who are switching to Mason Rudolph, who you said last show is a better quarterback than Will Levis. So maybe they have a bit of a better chance there against the Colts. And then the Miami Dolphins, they play the Jets again, which I think the Jets can be a little feisty here at the end. Aaron Rodgers has something to prove. I don't know, man. I think that there's a lot that is in the Bengals' control if the Chargers can win. But if that's not the case, then I'm kind of with you. If the Broncos end up winning, it's not going to be easy for the Bengals to make it into the playoffs. So really, it's tonight. All my focus and attention is going to be on tonight in this football game. Bolt up, Tom. Bolt up.
People are telling me that my camera is foggy or blurry. Is that right? Because when I see it in the screen, it doesn't look that way. Does it look blurry to you guys?
It looks like it normally does.
It's good. It's good now.
Blurry? Does that mean blurry?
It looks fine, Tom.
Okay, well, because I'm getting some text messages, and I just want to make sure. I mean, if it looks bad, I'm trying to wipe it off. Take a shot of Luke and let me wipe this thing off, Casey, so they can't see me in the background.
Okay. Well, Luke.
When it comes to tonight, I think it's pretty interesting. At least the Bengals have a little bit going for them. When you're in a situation like this where you need X, Y, and Z to happen and you have a sub 10% chance to make the postseason, the Chargers are dying to win this football game. I mean, they're trying to make the postseason as well. And this is still a AFC West divisional game. The Chargers are slight favorites. I think it's strictly because they're at home. I would make the argument that they'd be bigger underdogs than Denver is if this game was in Denver, just because how hard it is to play in the altitude. And the crowd at Mile High is amazing. So let's see if that works against a rookie quarterback. Whenever I think of the Chargers, though, I just think of that nightmare that happened on Sunday Night Football where we start down, 27-0 and come back in that game to eventually lose because Evan McPherson couldn't put one through the uprights in 2 different tries down the stretch like we've seen multiple times this year. But it's going to be a good game tonight. I think this is the type of game that's actually really physical football. This is not the old AFC West that we're used to. It's a new era. It's not Brandon Staley and the young head coaches in Denver and LA. It's 2 guys who have been around the block. Harbaugh completely changed this team. And that's something interesting to note in relation to the Bengals. Harbaugh came into a situation where Justin Herbert is absolutely a franchise quarterback, where he has the talent, he has the tools, and he just didn't have the big win that was holding him back. And he still doesn't have it. But he said, I know you're really talented, Justin. I know you like throwing the ball. I know you're really good. I know you're a stat sheet stuffer. That's what he's always been. But I want to take the ball out of your hands. I want to make this job easier on you. I want to make you a 10-year pro in this league. And that means you're only going to throw the ball 25 to 30 a game instead of 35 to 45 a game like they used to in their air raid attack. They go in and they pretty much bring in the entire Denver backfield. And now they run the ball 30 times a game. They do it effectively. They have 2 of the best tackles in football. And the Chargers are a damn good football team. So the fact that you can turn around an organization, a play style with a very similar roster. They lost Keenan Allen in the offseason. In just 1 year, it's a testament to how much coaching means in this league. So when everyone wants to go back to that question of do head coaches really matter that much? Is the hot seat too early to be thrown at guys? I think once you get 3 or 4 years under your belt and things aren't working, there's absolutely a reason, because Jim Harbaugh has proven that in just a matter of months, you can turn a team who was mediocre at best into a north of 500 football team.
Okay, we're not spending a bunch of time on the Chargers and Broncos game. The game is what it is, and there's this much chance the Bengals get in. Those are more than viable points. I think oftentimes, though, in this game, just as a final footnote here, I mean, don't disregard the coaching of Sean Payton. I mean, this guy's won a Super Bowl. He's had, I think, 8 seasons where he's won 10 or more games. I mean, think about that for a minute, right? Think about that for a minute. Yeah, you can say, well, yeah, Drew Brees. Well, so what? So what? The Bengals have got Joe Burrow, and they've had 2 good years. He's been hurt the other 2, and they're a 500 less than 500 team this year. So just having a great quarterback doesn't mean that you're going to have a great seasons. But this Bengals, I know you guys, I don't want to speak for you. I don't think this game's a layup. And I had made the comment earlier and was completely wrong. Of course, it is going to be starting at quarterback. It's going to be Dorian Thompson-Robinson. I mean, Jameis Winston was throwing too many picks. And so he's not a viable option. That was his trouble in Tampa Bay. But when you go back and you look at some of the numbers, and I mentioned a couple of them early, the Bengals in that first game, and they had everybody in that game. T. Higgins played in that game. Jamar Chase played in that game. The Bengals had a total of 12 first downs. Cleveland had 100 more yards of offense. 100 yards. Now, Deshaun Watson started that game and got hurt. Dorian Thompson-Robinson came in the game eventually to finish up in that game. The Bengals had 12 first downs, 223 yards of offense, were 2 for 13 on third down. And bear in mind, they did not turn the ball over at all in this game, the Bengals. And the defense scored a touchdown. So this offense, the same offense, personnel-wise, it's going to take the field on Sunday, fellas, scored 14 points against the Browns. But Casey, you and Luke are looking at saying like it's a layup.
I think it's part of me says that it is a layup because they're playing DTR. I mean, that they looked really good. The defense did with DTR out there on the field. They limited the Browns offensively in what they were able to do in that game. And I think that this is a Browns team that was still fighting when we were playing against them. Like, I don't know. I think they've definitely kind of laid down last couple weeks. Their edge rusher, I'm drawing a blank at the top. Garrett.
Myles
Garrett. Yeah, he got hurt last week. Might be banged up for this game. Like, they're dealing with some injuries, and I don't know. I feel like they've already kind of packed it in. Maybe the pride thing will kind of set in for this team, for the Browns, but this is a gotta-have-it game for the Bengals. And I know we've all season have said that they've had games and they've not come up big, but this is one of those times where I just feel like they've kind of started to get the momentum rolling in their favor. They've stacked a couple wins here. I just feel like
crappy teams.
Well, this is a crappy team. This is a crappy team too. Well, the Browns are a very crappy team.
You're right.
So I just feel like this is a time for Joe Burrow to say, like, we're in it. We're still in it, regardless of whatever the percentages are. He's going to hold that team accountable, making sure that they play to the level that they know that they can play, and find a way to pick up a dub. I just feel it in my heart and my soul that this team is going to find a way to make that final game of the year matter, right? That's all I think we're really asking for out of this team is, can they make the rest of the season matter? I think they can. I think that they can win out and make things interesting. So,
okay. All right. And Luke, you think this is a layup?
Absolutely. This is a transition.
I can't believe you guys are saying that.
Underneath. I mean, you try and show this one off, it's a layup. The Bengals are going to beat the Browns by like 28 in this game, I'm telling you. The Browns have quit. What people don't realize is that the Browns arguably have had just as disappointing of a season as the Bengals. I mean, they're reloaded. They're coming in with one of the best defenses in the NFL, and it all laid in their $1 million man, Deshaun Watson, and that start of the season was abysmal. Obviously, the guy's been roughed up and has never really been the same since his time in Houston, but it's similar to the Bengals where, like, I know Joe Burrow, and at least the guy we paid all of our money to, is like MVP candidate and would be, if we had 2 more wins on the season, would be the runaway favorite right now to win it, or at least competing with Josh Allen. But the Bengals still, like Casey said, like, you still have a fighting chance, and it's like a pride thing for them because they know they're still in it. They know the fans are still behind them because real fans don't give up until it's truly over, and it's not just yet. So the Browns, it is over. It's been a disappointing season. This has typically been a spot where Cleveland's been in this game, and it's like the Browns, when they were in like their dark dog days of the Browns we really know, it's always been like, oh, it's Cincinnati, it's a division rival, it's an in-state matchup. We stink. We have nothing to lose. We're going to go give everything we have. It seems like a different story because the Browns were supposed to be really good this year. They're now on their third-string quarterback. Their defense has been really underwhelming from a perspective of like this was a dominant defense good enough to win you a football game. And now they've played, 13, 14 weeks of the season, and nothing's working out. I don't really see the Browns coming into this game with nearly as much energy as the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals get this win handedly, I think.
Okay. For another day, but I think this is worth starting to talk about maybe as early as Monday, and we'll see how the game goes. This whole Joe Burrow sort of thing going on, for lack of a better term. And when I say thing, we talked at the very beginning about the sideline situation with Zach Taylor, his body language on the sideline, clearly really upset about the way things are going right now. And the direction not only of the team and the offense and his own play, admittedly so. And that's what I love about Burrow is you've got all these people around here that they walk around and they're like, oh my God, this guy's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And look, I'm not saying he's not. He's my favorite player in the league. But Burrow is the first one to come out in the press conference every time. Even when the stats will tell you something else, he'll come out and say, man, I got to be better. The last game, he turned the ball over 3 times the last game. Okay? The rest of his numbers may have looked great, right? But he turned the ball over 3 times. So while a lot of people walk around and think he's perfect, he knows he's far from perfect. He's been as close to perfect as they can get on their team, him and Chase. But the only thing that I would throw out there for us to think about over the weekend is I sure hope he has taken the time because, look, he's a very calculated guy in terms of picking his spots on when to say things. He's never come right out and gone to bat for a player like he is or for the franchise to make a move like he is right now with T. Higgins. And I'm not saying he's wrong to go to bat for T. Higgins. Everybody, you don't even have to be a Bengals fan to love T. Higgins. He's a hell of a player, seems like a great dude, right? And he cares. The only issue with T. Higgins, he's hurt too much. So his stats are pretty in the grand scheme of things compared to other wide receivers in the league. Go look it up. The last 3 years, he's not even in the top 20 in receptions, and you're not going to find him in the top 20 in yards. So he's not a number one guy, despite the fact that a lot of people think he might be paid like a number one guy by somebody else. But he doesn't play enough to be a number one guy. But I just hope that Burrow has thought through this whole thing about what the Bengals realistically will be able to do, or more appropriately, or more accurately, not be able to do if they go take Burrow's advice and sign Higgins and Chase to long-term deals. I'm not saying he's wrong, but one thing cannot be denied. If you have Burrow, Chase, Higgins, all under long-term contracts, that will end up being over $110 to $120 million of your salary cap on 3 players. You haven't improved the offensive line, and you haven't taken a step in the direction of improving your defense. So Joe Burrow better make damn sure that when he's going to bat for his teammate, and I admire it, but if he's going to bat for his teammate, I sure hope he recognizes that perhaps by doing that, he's going to get hit 30 more times next year. Casey, any thoughts on that? Luke, any thoughts on that?
Luke, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go. It's an interesting point. I think a lot of people are thinking about that. I've been nervous to even have this conversation because there's not a right or wrong answer just yet. You re-sign T. Higgins, we go to the Super Bowl next year, and it's all euphoria, and we're jumping up and down in the streets of Cincinnati with the best offense in recent NFL history if he stays healthy and they keep going the way they're going right now. But I think the offensive line, it's been weird. The Bengals have experimented in certain things. They let guys go. They bring the same guys back. They go get Geno Stone. Some of these projects just aren't working out. Obviously, the drafting hasn't gone well outside of maybe Mims and obviously Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow in the couple of years past. T. Higgins, a hell of a draft pick in the first pick of the second round. So is it like you want to hold on to like the Cincinnati guys that you developed that are your franchise guys, or do you want to go play the market and take a couple million from T. Higgins that you wouldn't pay him? But like, who are you going to go get with that money? Because the Bengals signings, like I haven't liked him at all. Like, why didn't you sign Jesse Bates? To me, that's like a T. Higgins equivalent in the safety position. A young guy with a ton of energy who loves the city. He's a leader of the defense. He really worked well with the rest of the guys, and they let him walk. And like Cheeto, sure, that's fine with me. I wasn't too worried about that. But the Bengals let Joe Mixon and Tyler Boyd go last year. Obviously, Boyd was having like a regress. He just wasn't seeing the volume because of Higgins and Chase that he had in years past. But to leave Joe Mixon, who's now one of the best, if not a top 3 running back in the National Football League, I think the offense has been just fine. The Bengals know their identity. Joe Mixon is a ground and pound, really rock solid running back. But that's not the way they play. So I was fine with that decision. How are they going to play without T. Higgins? Does Yoshivas make a huge jump? Do they go get another somewhat budget receiver to fill that void and hope that Joe Burrow can start throwing guys open the way he has all year? I had the take 2 weeks ago that if you have a quarterback that you're going to pay as much money as the Bengals paid to Joe Burrow, I think every team there is room for a wide receiver 1. And that's that guy right next to me with the 1 on his jersey. I think if you have a guy as good as Joe Burrow, you don't need to spend all that money on 2 receivers. I think that he's good enough on his own to play with the rest of the high talent receivers in the NFL, whether you hit the market, whether you draft again, or whether you continue to develop guys. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think if you had like a mid-tier quarterback who was still getting the ball out quick, still an established starter in this league, maybe like a Pro Bowl level, because we know everyone makes the Pro Bowl, then sure, you sign 2 great receivers. You don't pay the quarterback as much as they pay Joe Burrow, and you had the receivers get themselves open and make plays in the open space. Joe Burrow is good enough on his own where you can't spend $120 million on the offense and expect this exact result to not happen next season. So there it is. That's my take. I know the chat's not going to like it.
It's not $120 million on the offense. It's $120 million on 3 players.
That's what I'm saying.
That's not on the
That's where it's like if you pay Joe Burrow, aren't you paying him to run the offense? Like the Bengals would have the best talent offense with Chase and Higgins. Take out Burrow. Chase and Higgins as a duo is easily the best duo of receivers in the NFL. There's an argument for Jefferson and Addison, but hey, if I'm a defense and I have to go against probably the fastest receiver in the NFL in open space and then the biggest guy from a jump ball perspective, that's a nightmare. I think any quarterback can have success with those two, and I'm not taking anything away from Joe Burrow because he is playing like the best quarterback in the NFL every single week in and week out right now. But if you're going to pay a quarterback that much money, my opinion is, I've said it 10 times, I don't think you need to spend $120 million on 3 players. You pay the big bucks for the guy to go win you a game. Let's see if he can win it without the 2 best receivers in the NFL. Take the money elsewhere.
Well, the guy in Kansas City has proven it. And I mean, it's brought up over and over and over and over again. Yeah, they're paying Kelsey the big money at tight end. But, I mean, they've let guys walk out the door, most notably Tyreek Hill. And they've done just fine. Casey, before we get to college football and our picks, any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about paying T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow the $120 million, I always like to bring up, well, who are you going to go get in free agency? And I look at the free agent class this year. It's not good, just like the draft class this year. You're not going to probably find guys that are going to make massive differences. There's a few on this list, but will the Bengals spend, I don't know, the top dollar for Hassan Reddick at edge? No, probably not. So why not keep the guys here that have made a difference on this team, that you know make impact on this team right now, right? You know T, Jamar, and Joe, regardless of whatever the rest of the offense looks like right now, is a top 10 offense. I think that's where you spend the money, because you look at the list right now, guys that I would have considered like Milton Williams and Budda Baker, they're gone. The top guys are being re-signed by their franchises. I am not going to let one of my top guys now walk out the door for another team to get better. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to keep the talent that I've grown and developed over the years, and keep trying to hit in the draft, because that's just the way that these teams have been able to extend their success. The Chiefs don't go out and get the top guy in free agency. No, that's not what they do. They find the guys in the draft and they keep those guys.
Well, look. I look at a guy like Jerry Jeudy. They were talking about him on Off the Bench today. Okay? Now, has he lived up to the hype? No. He was out there in Denver. They didn't have a good quarterback. He was catching 52 balls, 800 yards, 60 balls, 900 yards, 54 catches last year for not even 800 yards. He goes to a place where it's the worst quarterback situation maybe in the NFL. They've had 3 guys play, and not one of the 3 is any good, or hasn't been this year. He's got 70 catches for 1,000 already, over 1,000 yards. I mean, the last 6 weeks, this guy has had games of 108, 142, and 235 receiving yards against Denver 3 weeks ago. His numbers before this year are basically T. Higgins' numbers. I don't know. Anyway, this all was centering on Burrow, not so much Higgins. It was centering on, I hope Joe understands, if he is trying to have an influence in the organization on who stays and who goes around here, and it's the first player now in his 5th season that Burrow has gone to bat for publicly in the organization to bring him back. I just hope he understands what the ramifications might be, because you talk about drafting guys, they have whiffed on 3 receivers now in a row. Burton is a disaster, a total disaster. Does he have time to get it together? He does. I'm not throwing in the towel on the kid, but his first year has been a disaster. Charlie Jones, unmitigated disaster. In 2 years, if you can ever get him on the field, he's had 1 punt return for a touchdown. And this was a guy that was supposed to be a good, solid, take Tyler Boyd's job receiver. And he never plays. And he's not even a great returner. He's not a great returner. He doesn't play enough to be a great returner. And then there's Yoshibas. We'll see on him. We'll see. So anyway, all right, let's get to the college stuff. Look, the biggest brands, Georgia's a huge brand. Alabama's a huge brand. There are others. But there's a reason why Notre Dame is playing tomorrow night in prime time, and a reason why Ohio State is playing Saturday night in prime time, because these are 2 of the biggest brands, if not the 2 biggest brands in all of college football. Luke, you look at the game tomorrow night. You're going to be there on the sideline and up in the press box. Do you think Indiana, and you said something earlier. I mean, let's be honest here for a second, okay? Michigan did not have a good year, but I think Michigan's got a lot of good players. They beat Ohio State, and they just couldn't score enough. But they had a great defense. They have a lot of good players. And Indiana could not do anything against Michigan in the second half of that game. They barely beat them. The other good team that Indiana played, they got boat raced in Columbus. You mentioned Notre Dame. Now, Notre Dame beat Texas A&M, who's a good team. They're not a great team. They lost 3 or 4 games this year. I mean, they're good. They're not great, but they're good. And they beat them on the road. They lost to Northern Illinois. And I said this to somebody last night. If you look at all the teams in the college football playoff right now that are going into the playoff, Notre Dame has gotten better on a larger scale than any other team this year from start of the year to now, of where they were to where they are. They're blowing everybody out. Now you can say it's against weak competition. Indiana has blown everybody out, except for Michigan, and they lost to Ohio State. Does Indiana have a fighting chance in this game tomorrow night? I mean, take the bias out of it. Do they have a fighting chance?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just don't really see the argument there that Indiana is as bad as people say they are. The Ohio State game, if you really want to talk ball from the argument that Indiana is so bad that they don't deserve to be in the playoff, that they're going to get waxed by 3 touchdowns. Indiana might get beat by 55 points tomorrow. But from what the product is that they've put on the field through X amount of games this season, the mistakes that Indiana made at Ohio State are mistakes that they have not made all season long. And you can say that it's better competition exposing them in that singular week, but this is an Indiana team 1 week before, one game before against Michigan, that beat Michigan 20-15 in another ugly game where Indiana walked off that field, and I followed those guys into the press conference along with Coach Cignetti, and they were not happy with the way they played. And that was an effort that was good enough to beat a Michigan team that you and I and everyone who watches football knows Michigan turned it up at the end of the season. And losing to Indiana, it kind of rung their bell. They played better in that game from a defensive perspective. Then their offense went for 50-plus against Northwestern. And then the next thing you know, they walked into the horseshoe and beat Ohio State. So I'm going to say it was a different Michigan team the last 3 weeks, and Indiana was the only team to beat them. So once that's out there, you look at the OSU game. You lose 35-15. They take a punt back, and they drop a punt and muff it at the 4-yard line. So now you're looking at a 24-15 game where Indiana had the worst offensive showing that we have seen this entire season. We haven't even seen an Indiana quarter that bad offensively. Coach Cignetti said, we're done with the silent count. They're never going back to that again in press conferences this week. He said, we know it's going to be allowed at Notre Dame, but we have a Canadian quarterback. He's built for these conditions. We hope it snows, and we're going to have him run the show and really put the ball in his hands and see if he can beat Notre Dame, because they played scared against Ohio State, and I don't think too many people came out and talked about that enough. The Horseshoe is an insane atmosphere. We know Notre Dame Stadium on Friday night is going to be just as crazy, if not crazier, with 80,000 strong. But Indiana, to say they don't have a chance when they're a 7-point underdog, is the line fair? Absolutely. I think that Notre Dame is coming into this game starting up 7-0. That's how it feels to me. Just from a talent perspective, from a physicality perspective, from the perspective that Notre Dame came into this football season saying, we want to win a national championship. Indiana came into this football season, picked 17th out of 18th in the Big Ten, and now that you get to the playoff, that doesn't matter anymore. There's no more mercy, and Coach Cignetti talked about that on the Pat McAfee show yesterday. He said, we're in this thing to win this thing, so I don't know why people are taking so much stock in an Indiana game against Ohio State when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, when Ohio State lost to Michigan. Where is that standard for everybody else? I get that Ohio State has a win over Penn State, but I don't think they're all that good either anyway. So Indiana certainly has a chance. They play very similar play styles, and I think it'll be on full display tomorrow night. It's going to be a game won in the trenches with older quarterbacks who have to make a play down the stretch in the second half. That's exactly what it's going to come down to. It's going to be physical. I think it's going to be somewhat slow for an Indiana team that likes to play with tempo. And can Curtis Rourke, or is it Riley Leonard, who steps up and makes a couple big throws on a couple big series down the stretch, because they're older guys, and it's time to make game-winning plays with the ball in their hands for both of them.
Okay. All right, we got about 3 minutes left, and then we got to get back. We got to get to picks. Either one of you guys, Casey, I'll start with you. Is there one game of these first-round games where you think we're most likely to see an upset? You've got SMU playing at Penn State. We have Clemson playing in Austin against Texas. We mentioned Indiana at Notre Dame, and, of course, Tennessee at Ohio State. Is there one game you say, I would not be surprised if the underdog won the game? Then, Luke, I'll ask you the same thing, and we get to picks.
Oh, man. I think the most popular one, I'm gonna be the square and say it's Clemson upsetting Texas. I think that's the most common one at the moment. I would hate to see SMU beat Penn State, but James Franklin's never won a big game in his entire career at Penn State. So it's just like that's the other game I'm looking at as a potential upset, as much as that upsets me. But I don't know. Sometimes they just don't get up for big games. They look really good against Oregon. Hopefully that can continue to carry over, so I look like an idiot for saying that. But my two picks would be SMU, Penn State, and Clemson beating Texas. Those are the two that I like the most for the upsets. I feel like the other favorites are going to handle business. But
okay. Luke, how about you? Are you going to tell me Indiana naturally?
From an upset perspective?
Yeah, I mean, all these games, where do you think that we're likely to see an upset of the 4 games?
I think it has to be as high as I am on Notre Dame. Just because I'm personally so high on Notre Dame, I would probably put it in SMU because I think SMU, there's that one thing in massive games like this where you can't win if you can't score. And on the other hand of that, I think we've seen Penn State have more offensive struggles than we've had SMU. Obviously, they've played Big Ten defenses, but SMU is going to be able to score. I'm really confident about that. The over-under in that game is 54 points. I mean, what is going on in State College, PA right now? There's not enough buzz. They turn this into a whiteout game, and it's $55 to get a ticket. If Penn State ever wants to hold themselves to the standard of the Big House or Ohio State and the Horseshoe and the rest of these Big Ten schools, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'd love to pay $55 to get into a college football playoff game, but something's a little off-putting about that, in my personal opinion. I know SMU is not a very big school and they're not going to travel very well, but for it to be a $55 get-in price to a game of that magnitude for the first ever home weekend of college football playoff games, James Franklin, what's going on with your fan base? I'd be calling them out for sure if people aren't dying to get into that one. But nonetheless, I would say it is SMU. I think Indiana's a very close second. As I personally think when we get into picks in a second, I'm going to say the same thing. Ohio State, I think, is going to beat the brakes off of Tennessee and a freshman quarterback. And Texas is that good. No one talks about it because they have the losses to Georgia. But Texas is going to beat Clemson by 21. So let's jump into picks while we're at it, if that's all right with you guys.
All right, let's go. You start us off, get us rolling, then we'll go to Casey, and then me. That's the order we will pick our games in, and here we go.
Okay, let's start. Hoosiers v. Notre Dame. I mean, this is as good as it gets for the state of Indiana. I think it's good for football. We've talked about this one enough. Indiana kind of has a two-headed snake rushing attack. Notre Dame, very similar in that sense. Love is their primary guy. I would give the quarterback edge to Indiana. There's something to note is that both Leonard and Curtis Rourke. Leonard came from Duke, Rourke came from Ohio University. So guys who have never sniffed a game of this magnitude and the volume that comes into the fourth quarter and down the stretch of these games when quarterbacks say you take the field and you can't even feel the lower half of your body because it means that much and you're so nervous. I think Indiana covers the number. I'd be crazy to pick against them. I've covered this team all year. I've been to press conferences this week. I've stopped by practice. This team is ready to go. They know how embarrassing that Ohio State game was from a national perspective, and they've shook it off. I really think they have. They've shook that off, and Coach Cignetti and company is ready to win at Notre Dame Stadium. I don't know if they're going to win, but I think they cover a touchdown.
Okay, Casey?
Luke, they haven't shook nothing off. Notre Dame is going to roll Indiana. It's not even going to be close. I hate to say it. Ohio State really exposed Indiana, and Notre Dame's defense is just so much better. What, the scores? Run up the scores? Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame, they're going to run up the score so much. I mean, I feel bad for you, Luke. I really do. You're going to have a lot of tweets to write out. It's going to be a really tough look for you. Tom?
Boy, you got the circus in the background over there still at the station, guys sticking around from off the bench. I'm taking Notre Dame too. I do think it's going to be a better game than people think. But the game's at Notre Dame. So I'm taking the Irish. I really want Indiana to win the game. And I think they're going to play a good game. I don't think they're getting the doors blown off by any means. Okay, what's next, Lukey?
All right, SMU, Penn State. The spread for this one's 8.5. I'm going to take SMU. I think it's a square bet. I do. And I always try and be on the sharp side, and the sharp side's not always the right side. But this one is kind of going against what I typically do here. Penn State is good, but I'm still not sold on Drew Aller. So I don't think that offensively he can score enough points to win this game by 9, 10, 11 against an SMU offense. I think it's going to be like Penn State's up 14 and SMU scores a touchdown with a minute to go and they cover the number. I don't think that SMU is going to win. I said that they might have the best chance out of all the underdogs, and I stand by that. But I don't really like any of the underdogs in the opening round. So I'll take plus 8.5, but I don't love this pick at all. This is such a weird number.
Yeah.
Casey?
I'm with you on it being a weird number. I don't like it, but I can't bet against Penn State in the playoffs. it's a touchdown and a field goal. That's all they got to do. I think they can do it. They're a better team than SMU. They are. They can win a big game. That's in them. I know it deep down in my bones. They can win a big game. So I got to take them. Here. Tom?
Okay, well, the two coaches with the most pressure by far going into this playoff, and it's not even remotely close. Ryan Day at Ohio State and James Franklin at Penn State. If you have an SMU team, and I'm picking SMU, if SMU comes in there and wins this game, and the record is what it is against top teams for James Franklin, this game is at home. Trust me when I tell you, there is a lot of gripping going on around at Penn State because SMU is good. Aller's playing very well. He started to show me something for the first time because I've not been high on him. But he's playing well lately. But this game career-defining for both Ryan Day and for James Franklin because they've got these games at home. Each of these guys has to win this game. And I think SMU covers. I don't know about winning a game, but I think they cover.
Sounds like we're on the same page there. Clemson and Texas, this is the biggest number of the weekend, but I have heard from a public perspective that everyone's high on Clemson because it feels like they snuck into this playoff, which they did by winning the ACC championship. And they're saying, like, Clemson's a 12 seed. I would never want to see. Guys, I think that's all because of the brand. I don't think that Clemson has given us much to be excited about this year. I really don't think they're that good, and I certainly don't think they're good enough to play with Texas, let alone be in the conversation of beating Texas. Texas wins this game by 21, 28, maybe even 30-plus. Hook 'em horns, and I've never really been a horns guy. Clemson is not a good football team. The ACC is a weak conference. Give me Texas minus 12. I love that, and I never take favorites.
Ooh.
Okay.
For me, I think that I've already talked about how I thought this was the biggest upset alert. And I'm going to stick by with that. I think that I'm changing my pick around. I had Texas initially. I'm going to take Clemson here. I think that 12 points is a lot. I think that Texas is a little bit of a fraud. Clemson can really get after you on defense. I think that they can make it close. I think they can make it sloppy, and if they can make it sloppy, I think that plays into the underdog quite a bit. So I'm going to take Clemson in this one to get it done.
Well, one thing Clemson has is a good defense, and their quarterback is so up and down. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to get. He's a Texas kid on straight talent. He looks unbelievable. He can sling it all over the place, but he makes a lot of mistakes. But here in back-to-back weeks against good teams, Texas A&M and the University of Georgia, okay, Quinn Ewers has thrown three interceptions and only 2 touchdowns. In 2 games, 2 touchdowns. They beat Texas A&M. They only scored 17 points, and they lost in overtime when they couldn't score against Georgia. They had 19, and that included the points in overtime. So Ewers has been banged up. He's been hurt all year long. I am taking Clemson for sure to cover in this game. So Luke's the only one going with Texas. Texas defense is lights out. Offense, very, very shaky. And 12 points is a ton. All right, what's next?
The Tennessee-Ohio State game. One last thing to say about that. I mean, how cool is that for both of those kids? They played in the 2021 highest A Texas state championship against each other, Ewers and Klubnik, and they were the guys, the recruits that everyone in the country wanted. Ewers took the money at Ohio State, but then came back to Texas, Klubnik to Clemson with Dabo. That's so cool for them. So that inside the game is another kind of mental battle between the two offensive QBs. Tennessee and the Buckeyes, 7.5. Something really interesting when you see spreads that give a hook to a key number. I always like the favorite in that game. 7.5 looks so appealing for an SEC team who has beaten Alabama, who has a couple good wins, who it feels like has gotten better, and they're well coached. But Tennessee ain't ready to be a big boy. And I've been saying this all year. Tennessee thinks they're a big dog because they beat Alabama. And these aren't your typical. I mean, the first win against Alabama, it was the coolest scene ever at Neyland. And I was like, whoa, I might look at Tennessee to go to college there. But the Buckeyes are still the Buckeyes, And Ohio State is going to roll a freshman quarterback with the defense that they have. Jim Knowles knows exactly what he's doing. They won't mess up again, and they certainly won't lose again at home. I think the Buckeyes cover 7.5. That might be my favorite pick of the entire weekend.
Luke, I'm with you. Ohio State is going to dominate this game. They're going to get all their frustrations out and prove that they can, be considered a top dog program, because they are a top dog program. Tennessee is a fraud. Nico, I thought he looked really good at the beginning of the year. Hasn't looked nearly the same since the beginning of this season. So I think Tennessee is just a very fraudulent program. Ohio State going to dominate this game.
Well, like I said, for Ryan Day's sake, it better be Ohio State, because if they don't win this game, and look, they've got issues. Tennessee's strength is its defensive line. Ohio State's missing 3 starters, 2 of them All-Americans. One of them won the Remington Award, and Seth McLaughlin, and at center. All those guys are out. They're shifting around, we're told, again this week. But if Chip Kelly can decide we're going to throw it, rather than try and, the old, square peg in a round hole, try and run it every play at Tennessee, Ohio State rolls. I think they cover. All right, we got a couple pro games to get to before we get out of here.
All right, we can do these a little bit quicker. Still some big games this week. On Saturday, 2 massive games, the first coming inside the AFC. The Texans and the Chiefs. It's 3.5 in the Chiefs' favor. Mahomes being a little bit beat up makes me want to take the Texans. I think the Bengals fans really want the Texans to win this game, because then it continues to force that narrative where if the Bengals can hang alive till week 18, the Chiefs hopefully are playing for something if we can get the Broncos in a lose and you're out type of situation. Obviously, that's so hypothetical. That's such a long shot. But in the sake of this game, I think Houston can cover 3.5. I haven't been too high on the Texans all year, but the Chiefs don't cover ever. The Chiefs are sub 20% against the spread this year. And you really start thinking about some of their games. It's like a walk-off field goal against Carolina before the Raiders beat you. The Chiefs are bad at covering numbers. I don't think they cover 3.5, and this goes against what I typically do.
No, I'm with you 100%, Luke. The injury to Mahomes too. I know he didn't even make it on the injury report, but there could be something there too. He might be limited in being able to extend the plays, be as an efficient quarterback as he's been. And like you said, the Chiefs not been able to cover all year long. I like the Texans a field goal and some. So, Tom?
I'm taking Kansas City. I never bet against Mahomes. Move on.
All right. Next game is Steelers-Ravens, massive AFC North game. I'm just going to lay the 6 with the Ravens. Just kind of look at the line. Did it last week with Philly. Philly, 5.5, 6-point favorites against the Steelers. Vegas doesn't respect the Steelers. If you turn the Steelers on TV, the only really thing I respect about them is how well coached they are and how tough and physical they are. They're just not as good as some of these upper top-tier teams who are going to be competing for a Super Bowl, and there's a reason why they're 6-point underdogs, and it's not just because they're on the road. Give me the Ravens. They cover 6. They win by 14.
Lamar has only won one game versus the Steelers in his entire career. I think that the Pittsburgh Steelers can extend that winning streak a little bit further. Tom?
I think that sends what you just said. I think that sends Lamar to another level this week. They're at home. Pittsburgh's starting to, feel it a little bit. I think there's a huge pressure in this game, a chance for Baltimore to move into a first-place tie. I take the Ravens to cover.
All right. Bengals-Browns. Typically, we don't fade the Bengals on this program, and as you can see, I have my orange-colored lights. I got my Uno jersey.
Yeah, you also have the Randy Johnson bobblehead there in the background. I like that.
I got the Marty Brennan one back there. I'm taking the Bengals. They're not hitting stride, and that's what I don't want Bengals fans to be delusional about. What the Bengals have given us in their little win streak that we have going here isn't really anything different. It's not like they're a different team. They're still dominant offensively, but they still make mistakes. They still commit bad penalties, and they're still an abysmal defense. So don't be fooled. But the Browns are just 7.5, 8 points worse. I think the Bengals cover, and they win this game by 8 to 10 points.
Yeah, I'm with you. Easy cover for the Bengals. Browns have basically given up on the season. Tom?
I'm stunned. You got me. The Bengals are 6-8. They're 6-8, and they're giving 7.5 against anybody. especially a division opponent that they've been far sub 500 against the last 5 years, and they only scored 14 points against him the first time, there's no way I'm picking them to cover. I think the Bengals win the game. But AFC North games tend to be close. The first meeting was close. The difference was a defensive touchdown in that game for the Bengals. And so I'm thinking Cleveland is going to cover the spread. Is that our last game?
No, last one is a really good NFC matchup here. Eagles and Commanders. The spread is 3.5. Eagles coming off a huge win, and they just prove themselves every week. This is the hottest team in football. And I think, Dad, you said on the show Monday that you think they're the best team in football. However, the Commanders at home, they've kind of flown under the radar a little bit. I'm going to take 3.5.
Yeah.
I think that they could upset the Eagles in a huge letdown spot. That's certainly a gamble. That's what these point spreads are all about. But I'm willing to take a gamble here with this Washington team. I think they've had this one circled for a while. They know what it means to them. They're trying to make the postseason. Give me the Commanders in a huge one at home.
The Eagles are basically the big brothers to the Commanders. It's very similar to the Steelers and the Bengals. They have a hard time playing against the Eagles, that being the Commanders. I like the Eagles in this one. They get business done against a rookie quarterback. Tom?
All right, well, I'm without a doubt taking in this game the Eagles. Fly, Eagles, fly. What's the move? What's the move?
Well, you know what the move is you and Casey. That is your Encore Technologies United Dairy Farmers Square Bet of the weekend. Everybody clap it up in the chat. That is a sucker bet right there. Everybody and their brother is going to be on the Eagles. Jaden Daniels is going to go for like 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. We'll come back to the show Monday. Wait, everyone in the chat, we typically give, my pick of the week. That's the one right there. Trust me.
What?
But the move. The Commanders. I have not lost, and this could totally be me jinxing it. But like the specific pick that I give to the chat on Thursday's show, it's like a whopping like 5-6-0 now. Hopefully we can get it up. But
all right.
Be the move. We know what the move is for me. I'm all in. I'm covering the team. Signed up for this gig, and the fact that it is going to lead me into Notre Dame Stadium with a credential on my chest Friday afternoon is the coolest thing. I couldn't be more blessed. I'm so lucky. I thank everyone that has made this season so great, and I don't think it's over. I think Indiana's going to come compete in South Bend, Indiana. So I'll be there on Friday night, and my mood the rest of the weekend will be pretty much determined from here on out. If the Chargers can win tonight, I stay alive. Then we go and work the game for Indiana, and we limp into Sunday, Casey. That's what we do. We limp into Sunday with our glasses just bright orange.
That's right. I will be celebrating Christmas on my side of the family, so that's going to be my move. And watching college football, that'll be the move. Bengals, college football, Christmas. Tom?
It's my first weekend off since August. So I am ready to roll. And Blackmore says Luke is the best Brenneman. Big buoy! Big buoy! I'm hanging right here, man. I'm hanging right here. Ella and Luke are both home for Christmas break. I get to see my kids, get to see my bride. I get to watch a ton of football and hang with some buddies tomorrow night with couples, big couples Christmas party we have every year. Watch the Hoosiers and then watch football all day Saturday, a little bit Sunday. But, it's all about a great weekend with our whole family. Thank God everybody's here, safe and sound, and safe and sound travels to Lukey Man to get up there and back. Okay, fellas, thanks so much. Have a great weekend, each and every one of you. Thanks so much, everybody in the chat, the hundreds, if not thousands, that have been there with us here today. So everybody enjoy your weekend. God bless, stay healthy, and let's enjoy this weekend, man. It's almost Christmas. We'll see you Monday.